Okay, everybody. I have 11:01, and so we're going to go ahead and get started as folks continue to pop in here. But my name's Casey Phillips. I am the forestry program leader in Land and Water, and I'll be your moderator for the webinar today. We're excited to have with us Caitlin Brett, our agency fur bearer biologist, and Colleen Offenbutel, our game mammal and survey supervisor. And they're going to be going over some research and status updates on eastern spotted skunks today. Caitlin has been in her role for about a year and a half now, and she came to us from the NC State Black Bear Project, where she was a project manager. She did her master's degree at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, and she has an undergraduate from The Ohio State University. Colleen has been with the agency almost 20 years now. Most of that was serving in the black bear and fur bear biologist role, and she has over 30 years in the wildlife management field. Colleen is also a Buckeye and has a master's degree from Virginia Tech. And Colleen started the Eastern Spotted Skunk Cooperative Study Group, where she's played a very active role in that since 2004. And we were all sharing fun skunk stories before, and I'll let Colleen share hers as she gets going and work that in somehow. But Caitlin, if you're ready, I'll let you guys go ahead and take the wheel, and we'll get going.
Alrighty, sounds good.
I Caitlin, think you gotta let me make that correction.
Colleen might want to correct the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm a Bobcat, not a Buckeye. Ohio University.
Thanks for correcting me. I'm
no
sorry.
worries. And you can call me almost anything you want. Never call me a Buckeye.
Okay, well, we can all get behind that. That's fine. That's great. I apologize.
No, that's great. Thanks, Casey, for the introduction. Like you said, I'm Caitlin, in case that wasn't clear already. But yeah, I'll be starting off the presentation, and then Colleen will take over for a little bit here, and then we'll wrap up with some Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions, there should be some time towards the end for those. But just, yeah, like we said, we're going to just kind of generally be talking about research and some status updates for the eastern spotted skunk here in North Carolina. We'll generally be kind of giving a little background on the spotted skunk as a critter, talk a little bit about their status in North Carolina, talk a little bit about our efforts as far as developing research and developing a knowledge base for this species in North Carolina and beyond, and then talk a little bit about those research efforts and results, and then what that means for the current status of the skunk in North Carolina. So I think first we should talk about who else is out there in the skunk family. There's a whole variety of critters, from stink badgers to hooded and hognose skunks to the more familiar striped skunks that you've probably seen. And then there's also, now after some updated genetic work, 7 different recognized species of spotted skunks throughout North and Central America. We'll be talking today about the eastern, or sometimes you'll see it as the Alleghenian spotted skunk. And that is, again, one of these 7 much smaller skunk species in this group. Getting used to the clicker mode. Okay. So again, we're looking at this this range in the yellow here when we're talking about the eastern spotted skunk. Previously, this yellow and this gray kind of blob were merged together. We thought this was one species, but have since distinguished between the plain spotted skunk that you can see in the gray outline there, and then the eastern spotted skunk in yellow. For some slightly less scientific names, we've heard these things called a whole variety of things over the years. Anything from civet cat, polecat, stink cat. I'll say they're not a cat. They're not even really closely related to cats at all. To, I believe this is a French fur trapper name, but l'enfant du diable means devil child or child of the devil. I believe fart squirrel might be Texas in origin, Texan in origin. And then finally, my favorite is phobie cat, calling skunks phobie cats. I believe the origin there is due to phobie being short for hydrophobia, which is a symptom of rabies, which they can pretty commonly carry. But that's a fun little nickname that has developed over the years. Use the click again. You might be thinking, have I seen one of these spotted skunks in North Carolina? I'm sure I've seen a skunk before. It's possible, but more likely than not, if you've seen a skunk in North Carolina, it's that one on the left, the striped skunk. Both of these are native to North Carolina, and we'll talk a little bit about here some similarities between these two, right? They're kind of cousins within that skunk family. They both have this really high contrast black and white pelage. This for both these species, this acts as a warning, because obviously they are not only kind of displaying behavior and coloration that might indicate that they're dangerous, but they do also back that up with a very potent spray. The striped and spotted skunks are generally pretty shy around humans, but I've seen plenty of footage of them interacting with other wildlife where they will be much braver than their size might indicate. A lot of times they'll kind of stomp their feet, make themselves seem really big. They'll put their tail up. They'll kind of do this big bluff display to make themselves kind of seem more dangerous than they are, to ward off unwanted attention. And then, of course, if that doesn't work, they can go ahead and spray whatever unfortunate soul has decided to continue pursuing the skunk. Another similarity between these two is they're both pretty generalist omnivores. They'll hunt and forage for a wide variety of food, a lot of invertebrates, a lot of scavenging in the mix, a lot of invertebrates, a lot of vegetation and fruit matter as well. So, and then they're also pretty similar in that they have similar cycles on a seasonal and daily basis. So both critters are primarily nocturnal, and then neither of them hibernate in the winter. That's actually generally when their mating season is kicking up around mid-February to March. They say love is in the air around Valentine's Day, and you can smell it on the roads when skunk mating season kicks up in the winter. And then what is different between these two species, right? So striped skunks are found throughout most of North Carolina, with the exception of the southern coastal plain region, where we still have some counties where we haven't seen detections of striped skunks. But they're much more adaptable and abundant throughout the state, whereas our spotted skunk is these days strictly found in the mountain counties of the state. We say they're kind of cryptic, right? They're hard to detect even when they're in a given area, and they're generally a little bit less common in areas where they are. Our striped skunk is much larger. Think about the size of a small house cat, right? 5 to 12 pounds is pretty common, whereas our spotted skunk is just a couple of pounds on the big end, 1 to 2 pounds. Striped skunks will have 5 to 9 kits per litter, whereas a spotted skunk might only have 2 to 4. So spotted skunks generally have this much lower reproductive output. And then one big difference is that the striped skunks, after doing this kind of display, will often just turn their little butt around and make this kind of U shape to spray, or they'll turn to spray their victims. Whereas our spotted skunks famously will put on this little handstand display where they actually put their rear legs in the air. We'll get a picture of this in a second, and do this handstand before they spray, like something like that. I think it's very cute, but I have yet to be sprayed by a spotted skunk, so maybe I would think otherwise after that. But just again, for size comparison, this is a trail camera photo we got from this last survey year, but we have our spotted skunk first, and then our striped skunk right after. So you can kind of see just between those two what the size difference looks like. And You can also see a little bit, obviously, of what is different about their coat patterning, right? So it's kind of easy to know when you see it, but the spotted skunks have this kind of marbled patterning down their back, whereas a striped skunk typically will have more of this linear striping pattern down its back. And you can also tell from, if you're able to get a close-up of their faces, spotted skunks will almost always have this triangle-shaped patch on their head, whereas a striped skunk will have a narrow little band between their eyes. And so now that you're all experts, we'll have a quick skunk ID pop quiz. I guess we could do reactions to vote on these, if that's not too crazy. I guess if you think it's a striped skunk, give me a thumbs up reaction, and if you think it's a spotted skunk, give me a heart reaction. We'll see how this goes. So up first, if we'll get a crowd response. All right, cool. We have hearts for the spotted skunk. Very good. Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up for striped skunk. Good. See if we're all unanimous here. I'm seeing all thumbs up. Good. That is a striped skunk. All right, hearts for spotted. Good. Okay. All right, what about this next one? I would agree. Also a striped skunk. It's got this huge patch of white down its back. You can't really see those stripes, but that's actually a pretty common morph to see, where there's a lot more white than just those two stripes. So you guys are doing great. What about this one? All right, yeah, kind of blurry, but might look like stripes, but that is in fact a spotted skunk. And then our last one. Oh, I see a couple hearts. I think majority does win here. This is a striped skunk, but absolutely, there's almost this marbling happening. And I think maybe, Colleen, did you want to pop in on this next slide to talk about the variation? I saw you unmuted, but I will say there can be a lot of variation on striped skunk specifically. You can see some of these have the classic stripes. Some of these are almost all white down the back. Some of these just have that little cap of hood, that cap of white as like almost a hood looking pattern. But none of these pictures are of hooded or hognose skunks. These are all striped skunks. And none of these are spotted skunks. So all that to say, if you ever get a picture or you have a picture from a landowner perhaps and you're not sure, shoot me an email and I'm happy to help with ID. Because we do want to know when we're seeing spotted skunks. And a lot of times we get striped skunks that just look a little weird, but happy to see those and help with ID too. Right. And here's where, there we go. Here's where I'll pass it over to Colleen to take over about what we've been learning about spotted skunks over the past 10 plus years here.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about kind of what else we know, but to be honest, it's more a conversation about what we didn't know for many, many years. So next slide, Caitlin. All right. So, what we do know is that there's been a decline range-wide in the eastern spotted skunk population, as well as the range itself. And back in 2005, this really, became obvious when Gomper and Hackett did a paper showing the decline of the eastern spotted skunk, mainly through trapper harvest records. Now, one thing to note with trapper harvest records is there could be a lot of factors that go into the level of trapper harvest, right? Fur prices can impact the level of trapper harvest if prices are high or low. But Gomper kind of still teased out this information, and it did show a pattern that the population had declined, which pretty much mapped, the anecdotal report that a lot of researchers and state fur bearer biologists were getting from trappers, from the public, even from their own experience in the field, that they just weren't seeing that many spotted skunks. Next slide. So what this is showing is on the left, it shows kind of the historic range as best we could gather from the records. And you can see the spotted skunk. Again, this is now showing the range, to be honest, of the Appalachian as well as the plains. But at the time that this was published, they were still kind of lumping the eastern spotted skunk into one species group and not splitting it out. But, they showed this range on the left of kind of the historic range. And then on your right, from occurrence data that we got from iNaturalist, we see that an estimated, depending on the state, depending on the area, but overall there was a 90% decline in range starting sometime in the mid 1900s. And that led to some changes in how the eastern spotted skunk was classified. So, for example, in some of the states that are adjacent to North Carolina, the eastern spotted skunk was listed as state threatened in Tennessee, and the trapping season was closed on that species. In South Carolina, they were SGCN species. In Georgia, they became a state high priority S2 imperiled species. And then in other states, they were effectively extirpated, such as in Louisiana. So again, it's not just North Carolina, but many states where we're seeing this population decline and the elevation sometimes in threatened or endangered status on a state level of the eastern spotted skunk. Next slide. So kind of bringing it back into North Carolina, in our very first wildlife action plan back in 2005, the eastern spotted skunk was listed as an S3 species, which meant it was considered rare or uncommon, and that there was a lack of knowledge about the species. Now, fast forward to 2015, when the Wildlife Action Plan is updated, and the spotted skunk was listed as one of 2 mammals in the order Carnivora that was a research priority because of its knowledge, because of the knowledge gaps that existed for that species. And as a result, the 2015 Wildlife Action Plan recommended that in order to fill that high knowledge gap, that there was a need for information on the distribution, population size of the spotted skunks. Once we get that, then start to look at what factors are affecting the population. Because again, not known. We don't know what's going on with the population. And overall, though, the Wildlife Action Plan back in 2015 concluded that the current levels of management were not sufficient for long-term viability. And you'll see there, I was pretty happy when they decided to use the spotted skunk actually as kind of an example in the appendix for how you could apply the Wildlife Action Plan towards a species. And so, and I very much took advantage of Appendix D in the Wildlife Action Plan. Next slide. So, when I was hired as the fur bear biologist way back in 2007, my predecessor was Perry Sumner. And I remembered soon after I got hired, he mentioned spotted skunks to me and basically said, I know, he said, I never had time to look at spotted skunks, but, that's something we should really start to look into to see what's going on with them. He mentioned to me that he suspected the range of spotted skunks had contracted in North Carolina, basically was reduced, which was pretty different than most of the other fur bear species, in which with those other fur bear species, from beavers to bobcats to river otters, we were seeing increases in the population and increase in range expansion. That was not the case we suspected for spotted skunks. But the challenge is it's really easy to detect range expansion. Not easy, but it's easier to detect range expansion of a species versus contraction. The other thing with spotted skunks, at least back, 2007, 2008, 2009, was, how do we detect spotted skunks? What's the tool we use to detect these guys? That was a question that was brewing within Southeastern fur bear biologists, is we want to kind of survey these guys, but we're not sure the best way how. Well, that really started to change, and thanks to the Wildlife Diversity Program. What happened is Chris Kelly in North Carolina, along with other Southeastern states, started to do these golden eagle surveys. in which they, at the top of a mountain, threw out some dead deer, put out some cameras to try to detect golden eagles. And they start to incidentally get on those cameras spotted skunks. And, I know now it kind of seems maybe intuitive. It kind of seems like, duh, of course you're going to get spotted skunks on cameras. But back in 2012, 2013, this was all brand new. Cameras were just starting to be identified as a potential tool for surveys. We were all still experimenting with them. So this was a big deal when we were like, wow, not only can we use cameras, but it seems like, yeah, if we throw out some kind of meat-based bait, that's what's going to draw in the spotted skunks. And you'll see here, yeah, this is a picture of Chris Kelly on her ATV, bringing up some dead deer to the top of the mountain. Next slide. So that then led to the first camera survey on spotted skunks in North Carolina. We started these surveys in 2015. When we started that survey in 2015, we still weren't quite sure what we were doing. We put out 69 cameras at 69 different sites, and we got one detection at one site. So not great detections. And again, that first year, it's like, okay, was that low detection because there's just not many out there, or is it because we have to improve our survey techniques? And as you'll hear from Caitlin again, it was the latter. But again, we were just kind of throwing things out there and over the years trying to refine the technique we used. So we did camera surveys from 2015 to 2025. You note 2025, that is the year after Helene. We were able, not to all the sites we wanted, but we were able to deploy cameras in winter of 2025 to sites because we wanted to try to get some baseline data to see if Helene and its impact on Pisgah and Nantahala had any impact or influence on spotted skunk. So we threw out some cameras. Some sites were inaccessible due to landslides or just couldn't even get on the road, but we were able to deploy quite more cameras than we expected. Typically, we deploy the cameras from January through April. That is determined to be the best time of year to detect spotted skunks. And we usually deploy about 50 to 51 cameras a year. And I do want to acknowledge all the Wildlife Resources Commission staff that have helped with that survey. We've had folks from operations assist with this. We've had tremendous support from LAWA. The Gamelands folks have really helped us identify sites, identify how to access those sites, as well as they've also deployed these cameras and monitored them. So really a multi-program, multi-division effort, and really want to acknowledge the tremendous help that we received over the years doing this camera survey. So we started the camera survey. Mainly, the original idea of the camera survey is like, we just need detections. We need observations. Where are these, what's going on with skunks? Where are they in North Carolina? We don't really know. So, of course, the purpose has evolved, but that was one of the primary ways, just to find out where skunks were occurring. Next slide. This is just, I think it's a video, Caitlin. Can you play it? Yeah. So yeah, this is just showing one of our cameras, and we had this set on video. This is in DuPont State Forest, typical observation we get of a spotted skunk. Luckily, they show up pretty well on these cameras. Next slide. So once we realized, yep, we can definitely get spotted skunks on camera, we started working with Warren Wilson on, well, if we can get them on camera, can we also get them on camera and get a genetic sample? And we wanted to try to see if we could get genetic samples, because then we could start to look at, maybe the possibility of, can we have mark recapture studies? Can we identify genetic bottlenecks? Can we determine inbreeding coefficients? Can we get more information beyond just a detection on a camera? So we worked with Warren Wilson. In a nutshell, yes, we can get spotted skunks on camera. As you can see, not on camera, but we can get them to go into these tubes and we collect the hair. Now, we experimented with brush snares versus glue, a glue tape, and glue was the way to go. So So that was good to know that, yes, we can get genetic material remotely without even touching the spotted skunk. Next slide. So another step in trying to, again, learn more about spotted skunks was the realization that no state can do it alone. All the states have low numbers of spotted skunks, and so it really needs to be a multi-state effort to really leverage small sample sizes amongst all the states and build up that knowledge base, build up our efforts. The SIAFA Fur Bear Working Group identified the need that we need to create kind of a study group to kind of organize not only all the state biologists involved with spotted skunk monitoring and research, but also the researchers involved and kind of learn from each other. And so we approached Dr. David Chakowski at Clemson University to chair this new group. We modeled it after the Southern Appalachian Black Bear Study Group, which this year has been in existence for 50 years. We modeled after that because that was a great working group that was very functional to model after. And so when this was created, its mission was to enhance communication about the species amongst state biologists, researchers, and others. Second objective of this group was to identify management and research priorities. Third objective was to facilitate collaborative planning, funding, outreach, monitoring, and research opportunities. And now this group has about 175 wildlife biologists involved, representing 24 state agencies, 21 universities, 5 federal agencies, and 2 tribal agencies. And it's really kind of ended up achieving what we had hoped, and that is, you know, increasing attention on the species, but also identifying ways to fill knowledge gaps on the species through a multi-state effort. This group has written a conservation plan, and thankfully that conservation plan does not sit on a shelf and collect dust. It is used to inform other researchers to identify those knowledge gaps, to then prioritize research and monitoring needs, as well as that conservation plan is updated. As our knowledge gaps are filled, we then update the plan to reflect what we've learned about spotted skunks. Next slide. So one thing that another product out of this working group beyond the conservation plan was just kind of leveraging all the people that go out to natural areas to hike, bike, just enjoy the outdoors. That's, hundreds of thousands of people that we can leverage to increase observation, especially in states in which maybe the camera surveys can't be conducted, or they're being conducted, but man, they're just not getting the detections. Let's leverage all the eyeballs that are out in the forest. So we really started to promote, outreach efforts to encourage the public to report suspected spotted skunk observations. So you can see examples from various states that they shared with the public. Next slide. And that led to then directing people to try to report their observations in iNaturalist. There's an Eastern Spotted Skunk project within iNaturalist. Caitlin and I, as well as other state biologists and researchers, have access to this database. And it's really helping to increase the volume of observations that we are getting from the public. iNaturalist is great because if someone gets a picture and they load it up, we can not only get that observation, but confirm that observation. As Caitlin showed, it can kind of be easy to, if you don't know what you're looking for, to mistake a striped skunk for a spotted skunk. So someone loads up a picture and then the community works to confirm that observation. So we not only get observations, but they're confirmed. Next slide. And then we also identified that, sometimes we opportunistically got our hands on a spotted skunk, usually, unfortunately, because it was dead, hit by a car, is the usual case. But let's leverage that mortality. So we have gotten spotted skunk carcasses, and when we get our hands on them, we take full advantage. We do a necropsy, collect samples, genetic samples, as well as samples to test for various diseases and toxins, such as canine distemper and anticoagulants. We give the genetics to Heather, as well as other researchers. The genetics we collected from our spotted skunks here in North Carolina did contribute to what Caitlin mentioned earlier, and that was, hey, We've got the Allegheny spotted skunk, and then there's definitely the plain spotted skunk. They're two different species. So our genetics directly helped with that finding. And again, I want to thank staff for contributing to this, either helping with these necropsies. I see, you can see Ashley Hobbs here helping conduct some sampling, but also we've had staff, in particular in Gamelands, that they're out on the road a lot. When they've come across a dead spotted skunk, they've collected it for us. So we have that sample. That's been the primary way we've gotten our hands on carcasses. Next slide. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about before handing it back to Caitlin was, again, going back to the 2015 Wildlife Action Plan. Spotted skunk was identified as a research priority species. And so that helped build the support to actually have a research project done with Clemson University, again, Dr. David Chakowski. And these are the objectives we handed him. It was a lot because, again, we had a high knowledge gap. So when we got this opportunity, it was pretty much going to David and saying, we need to know anything and everything about spotted skunk, light history traits, their home ranges, their survivorship, what are the mortality factors, what, habitats do they associate with? How do they interact with other species, in particular other mesocarnivores, as well as working with David to identify what are some long-term survey techniques we can implement to monitor that population. And again, Caitlin's going to take over and she's going to highlight some of the results we got from this project. Just a note, you can see in the map, this project took place in DuPont State Forest and South Mountain State Park and South Mountains Gamelands. Okay, take it away, Caitlin.
Okay, back to results. What did we find out? And I'll emphasize that, yeah, this is just highlights because it would take a while to really get into the nitty-gritty of all the project results that have come out of the past 10 plus years. But as Colleen alluded to before, one of the most important things was just figuring out how to effectively monitor skunks year to year. And back when Casey Dukes was working for the commission in 2002, she led a paper reviewing various camera survey methods that had been deployed throughout the eastern US, essentially to get an idea of which approaches were the most successful, right? And so they were able to find that the latency to detection, that is, how long these cameras sat out before a skunk was detected on one of them, was on average around 17 days. And so that helped us develop that idea of you can't just put these out for a couple of weeks here and there. You really have to leave them out for a bit of a longer period before you can reliably get these spotted skunk detections. And they also showed that the highest proportion of detections were, as some researchers probably already suspected, occurring in that midwinter through early spring period. So again, this is informing how we currently do annual surveys. They and some other researchers had also reviewed what types of bait were used, right? And so some of that additional research conducted more experimental comparisons of which baits and lures work best for this work. And again, those findings combined to inform our current winter surveys, which run for those 3 to 4 months, January through April. We used canned sardines in oil as a combination bait and scent attractant for each of our camera sites. And because we're leaving these out for a consistent period of time, we're able to get comparable results from year to year. Again, for those camera results, we're looking at putting out about 50 cameras each year, January through April. Most of those years from 2015 through 2025, we were able to get 7 to 10 sites with detections. So that's more or less the rate of detections, but of course the number of photos of skunks on each of those cameras can vary wildly. Like one site with one detection might mean we just got one photo. One site with a detection might mean we got dozens and dozens of photos if it happened to be right near maybe the core of their home range or right outside a den site. But over the years, we've had 51 unique sites to date with detections, and that added up to almost, I did this the other day, so we're still counting some of the more recent years of skunk detections, but over 2,700 photos of spotted skunk detections over the years. I'll add to that, missed this note, but 13 of those 51 unique sites where we were able to get at least one skunk detection 13 of those have been resampled and have had repeat detections in subsequent years. So whether that's the same individual or just a population persisting in that area, we have been able to get some of those repeat detections by resampling in areas over the years. So plenty of skunk photos were in that mix. Here's just a couple examples. But I'll add that that's not even to mention the wide variety of other species we're able to detect. Some of those are also pretty notoriously hard to detect and track, such as our long-tailed weasels shown here. And the, oh, sorry, can you say that okay? There we go. I'll add that one of the most important findings alongside how to survey for spotted skunks was also figuring out, what defines their habitat, specifically in Western North Carolina. If you remember from the range map we showed earlier, they really do have a variety of land cover types throughout their range for the eastern spotted skunk, right? They're from here all the way down through the Everglades. But we wanted to figure out what specifically defines that habitat in Western North Carolina for them. And one of the big things, of course, is rocky outcroppings. We think that this generally provides area for good forage, potential den sites, cover from aerial predation. And alongside that, we also see detections more frequently in these areas with really dense vegetation cover, which in the mountains of Western North Carolina looks like these really dense thickets of laurel, rhododendron, and oak understory. And then coarse woody debris is another factor that comes up when we look at this data, likely providing another, again, source for a potential den sites and also area for foraging for invertebrates in that leaf litter. And as we found across these surveys, if you think about these three things in combination, this does overlap quite a bit with some of the conditions that support wood rats and weasel habitat, for example, in many areas in western part of the state. So in addition to those camera surveys, again, Colleen mentioned we were able to use data from collared individuals in collaboration with Clemson to get a better sense for how these skunks are moving throughout their environment. So in addition to, again, seeing these really densely vegetated rocky outcropping areas being used, we were also able to detect den sites, as you can see on the bottom left here, one under the rock here and one just above the latex glove in the photo over there. I can't tell if you guys can see my cursor or not. But yeah, and we were also able to develop home range estimates from this and other projects. These can vary a good bit, but generally they kind of fell in this 500 to 1,500 acre range. Translated to square miles, that's 0.75 to about 2.4 square miles. And I always like to give a good reference on these things because sometimes these numbers can mean nothing if you're not thinking hard about that. But if you drew a polygon around our Centennial campus where our headquarters is located, and then included kind of east towards Dix Park, that kind of big chunk from Western Boulevard down to the farmers market is about 1 square mile. So I don't know if that helps anybody local to Raleigh. Otherwise, I don't know. But that's about 1 square mile for reference. And so that's somewhere in the range of what a spotted skunk might use for their home range. And it's variable and can depend a lot on what resources are available in that given area. That collar data was also able to kind of confirm, again, what was suspected already, but these critters have highly nocturnal movement patterns. As you can see here, this was tracking mean distance moved over a dial cycle or a day-night cycle. And the vast majority of that movement is happening after dusk and before dawn. We were also able to get a sense for how their role interacts with others on the landscape, right? So this camera data was able to help us model the role of spotted skunks alongside other mesocarnivores and their interactions at a community scale. So kind of to sum this up, this work has been able to support the hypothesis that small carnivores such as spotted skunks can essentially be used as sentinel species for global change as they react more acutely from pressure to interspecific competition, land cover changes, and sources of anthropogenic disturbance. This and other studies have been able to get a better sense for what skunks are eating. You can see this is a long list. Again, they're pretty opportunistic omnivores, but a lot of their diet consists of invertebrates, potentially small herpetofauna, reptiles, amphibians, potentially small mammals, birds, eggs. Oops, I skipped too far. But yeah, generally this can vary a lot. But this was able to just kind of confirm what is on the menu for spotted skunks. And then, of course, they're on the menu for some critters as well, namely aerial predators such as owls. This was identified as a major source of mortality for adult spotted skunks throughout these studies. But then we also saw some predation from other mammalian carnivores, as well as identified disease as a potential cause of mortality. And specifically, there we go. Specifically, canine distemper was identified as a major source. In one of these study periods in 2020, 4 of the 8 radio-collared skunks died within a 15-day period, and 2 more went missing, so potentially also succumbed to canine distemper, which was later identified as the source of mortality when we were able to necropsy those individuals. And while we're talking about threats from disease and pathogens, I'd like to also mention that we're currently investigating, this is very much in progress, but currently investigating the possible role of anticoagulant rodenticides as a health risk for spotted skunks and other mesocarnivores. This is a potential threat through both direct and indirect exposure to anticoagulant rodenticides on the landscape. This is when animals are either directly consuming this bait, or more commonly consuming rodents that have consumed an anticoagulant bait. And so far we've only been able to get results back from 2 of our spotted skunks. Luckily, neither of them had levels of anticoagulants detected in those 2 samples. We have 1 more pending results, but of course, this is a tricky species to get carcasses submitted for. So just because of the, oh yeah, Sarah, and impacts to raptors, thank you. Not just mammalian carnivores. But yeah, it's really tough to build up these sample sizes for such a cryptic species. And so we have been trying to get some traction with multi-state sampling efforts, so that it's not just North Carolina submitting samples, but also these surrounding states in the Southeast, to try to get a better idea of if and how this might become a factor for population persistence. All right, and then finally that brings us to the 2025 Wildlife Action Plan. Fast forwarded 10 years across the course of this presentation. In 2025, the spotted skunk was upgraded to a species of greatest conservation need, or SGCN, which really reflects these findings from the past 10 years of research, right? Identifying that they're very sensitive to potential habitat changes, disease threats. And what this does is it just increases priority for management, research, and funding for this species. I will say it's a non-regulatory decision, and so currently spotted skunks are still managed as a fur bearer. But we do like to mention that the estimated trapping pressure on these critters is extremely low, and unlikely to impact the population as much as some of these other factors that we've discussed. So moving forward, we would like to continue this annual monitoring and camera surveys over the winter. We'd like to increase sample sizes for analysis over time. When we're talking about things like anticoagulant rodenticides and CDV samples. Again, we're also leveraging our connections with other states throughout the Southeast to continue some of this work. And we'd like to continue refining our understanding of what habitat covariates are important for predicting skunk occupancy, and evaluating if or how we can preserve or manage for those characteristics to help facilitate population persistence and connectivity in the future. And I'll leave us with a note that if you do ever have a spotted skunk observation to report, I would be happy to get contacted directly, or you can always upload it to our Spotted Skunk Working Group page on iNaturalist. I'll come back to that in a second, but I will say first, do we have any questions? Now is the time. And if anyone's question relates to how to get rid of skunk smell, we can pop back to that too. But I will leave up my contact info slide here on the very end, and then take any questions that folks have.
And I will testify to the fact that the formula that Caitlin briefly showed about how to get rid of skunk smell does work. And it works well because I have been sprayed by a spotted skunk and had to take advantage of that formula to take care of my truck, myself, and a hotel room. So yeah, definitely make a note of that formula because it is effective. Caitlin, there's a question from Chris Cray. Did you want to address the first question?
I'm trying to figure out how to pull up the chat.
I'll read it to you. I actually had the same question, Chris. So what do you think limits spotted skunk from North Carolina's Piedmont historically and currently? And they do seem to have an odd sort of distribution. And I had the same thought. I didn't know if there was some life history traits or landscape features, maybe barbecue preference.
They're just mountain critters. Yeah, no, yeah, it is interesting. Like I mentioned, they persist all the way down into like the flatlands of the Florida Everglades. And so this is, I would say, something I'm not 1000% confident on giving a succinct answer for, but I think that density of cover and just the prey availability in these really dense areas could potentially be, sorry, you got the chat now, you're hitting with other questions. Could be a mix of a factor. Sorry, I'm reading all the chat now. But yeah, I think that's, Colleen, feel free to chime in, but I think that's difficult to say definitively why they have not previously, I guess persisted more in the Piedmont region of the state. I will say, when you get to a certain point in the eastern part of the state, I think past the fall line, I think that would make sense, where they just aren't able to burrow as well in sandy soils that don't hold that structure. They might not be able to find densites or forage as well in those areas. And I will say that probably historically, their range did expand a little bit farther into the Piedmont, at least in North Carolina. But yeah, currently they're pretty restricted in the state.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, and we don't have a solid answer, as you heard from Caitlin. We haven't been able to find evidence that they occurred in the Piedmont historically. Why is that? Could have been the habitat. Could have been, that Appalachian spotted skunk, that's the species we have, did follow the Appalachian Mountains, seems to be related to elevation. But then again, as you leave North Carolina and follow the Appalachian Mountains south, suddenly they're in the Florida savannas. So certainly in other states, we've seen that ability to adapt to different habitats is there. It's the hiding cover, that kind of mid-story, understory, that's a big factor, as well as, substrate that they can find a densite in, whether it's a rock cavity or soil thick enough to make that burrow. But why did they not historically occur in the Piedmont? Who knows? Who knows if the colonists never came to the Americas, maybe the spot skunk would have eventually expanded down off the Appalachian Mountains and into the Piedmont. But yeah, don't know. And then Caitlin, Chris asked a follow-up question. How many spotted skunks are taken by trappers each year, and will trapping be restricted now that they are SGCN?
Yeah, it's certainly something to consider. We discussed this a lot in the working group and within the Southeastern Fur Bear Working Group. In North Carolina, our estimates are based on voluntary surveys. So if someone is trapping spotted skunks and isn't responding to that survey, there could be more harvest happening. But our estimate based on those voluntary surveys is pretty much close to zero every year that I've seen over the past 5 years, maybe a handful estimated about 3 or 4 years ago, I believe, but really low numbers. And part of the reason we considered, keeping that keeping that as an option for trappers is just that we don't want to scare people into not reporting bycatch, for example, if they do get a spotted skunk that they didn't intend to, and they're willing to report that as an observation or even give us that carcass for sampling. That can be really useful data in a similar way that, getting observations from the public or iNaturalists can help us get a better idea of where they're at. But yeah, again, we think it's really low pressure compared to these other factors. But given that they are a SGCN species now, I think we're certainly considering what can we do from a regulatory standpoint to reinforce that, while still, again, making sure that trappers feel comfortable reporting if they get bycatch, and feel comfortable reporting those observations when they do occur.
Andrea asked, are there any other habitat covariates that are highly important to spotted skunks other than dense vegetation or rock features?
The one that comes to mind for me, and feel free to chime in, but elevation has been considered in various studies, I believe, but has kind of gotten mixed results as far as whether or not that's actually a determining factor or a true covariate in occupancy for spotted skunks, because again, they can persist in much lower elevation areas than they do in North Carolina, and it seems like it just happens to line up with these other factors in that part of the state. So
yeah, I would say the only another covariate I've noticed is kind of creeks. I guess you could say creeks and small streams. So I kind of have talked about the trifecta I look at when I'm kind of out in the field and determining, do I think this is good spotted skunk habitat? It's that dense vegetation that Caitlin's already mentioned, thick rhododendron. It's those rock outcroppings that she mentioned, but it's also the kind of the bonuses if there's a creek or stream. And I think for two reasons. I think one, those creeks and streams, again, not large ones, just real small ones, I think serve as travel corridors. You tend to see, thick rhododendron, associated with creeks and streams. And so it just go, again, that's where the spot skunk's going to be. It's a nice travel corridor. There's nice dense cover. But I think the other factor is prey base. Caitlin mentioned some of the prey base that spotted skunks consume, and that is also associated with, moist habitat, those creeks and stream systems, those, salamanders, herps, amphibians. So I think that to me is the trifecta. And, when Caitlin and I go out and we're like, this looks pretty good spotted skunk habitat, we put out a camera. It's pretty affirming when it's like, oh, we did get one. So we've gotten good at figuring that out. And as Caitlin mentioned, the next step is, okay, how can we conserve that type of habitat? And are there places we need more of it to help with the population? Caitlin, another question is, is there a direct competitive relationship that has been documented between spotted skunks and larger striped skunks? And Caitlin, why don't you show that David's community relationship, and you can talk briefly about that slide you had.
So that might be.
You keep going back. It's a few slides. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say as far as direct competition documented, I don't, if you're talking about I don't think it's been documented in a sense that, we see, camera footage of actual conflicts between spotted and striped skunks. But I do think that there's some intra-guild pressure when it comes to competing for similar food bases. But I think there is also some niche partitioning happening between land cover preferences and vegetation cover preferences for spotted skunks versus striped skunks. Yeah, I certainly wouldn't want to make it seem like they can't coexist in the same areas. But we do see some again interguild kind of indirect pressure from striped skunks potentially.
Well, in some cases, David showed it could be positive that, there was a positive relationship between spotted and stripes in terms of, again, don't know why. This is from camera data and detections, but where you had higher detections of striped skunks, you tended to get higher detections of spotted skunks. So certainly doesn't seem like there's direct competition. As Caitlin said, it could be because of that niche partitioning. So as of now, no, we don't see direct competition. Caitlin, next question is, what species of small mammals have you found as part of their diet, particularly species? And maybe you want to go to your diet slide, diet slide again.
So the
Yeah.
next one. I don't know if I remember offhand. Colleen, do you remember what?
Well, definitely remember mice and voles. Those are the
Yeah.
two. And I think other researchers, I think that's why, have found, maybe the occasional rat or chipmunk, though certainly those are larger, so more of a challenge for a spotted skunk, but by no means are they not capable. But it's mainly mice and voles, at least from the research that was done in North Carolina. All right, another question, Caitlin. How much of your camera survey work has been on private lands as compared to public lands? And a follow-up to that, have we considered surveying WCLP enrolled properties that have documented rock outcrop habitats?
I don't know if we have. I know the vast majority has been on public land over the past, yeah, nodding. The vast majority has been on public. And so, yeah, considering how we can incorporate private land, I think would be a great idea for moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, Chris, I think that's a great question. It's something, that certainly with the amount of private lands, yes, we have 2 national forests and game lands in the mountains, but there's still a significant amount of private lands. What's going on those private lands? Yeah, it's definitely something we should try to pursue. Of course, getting access is always the number one challenge. Um, I know years ago, Chris Kelly actually had a camera. I can't remember what Chris was using the camera for, what critter she was trying to detect. I think it was the northern flying squirrel, and she also got spotted skunk pictures on that same camera. And I remember asking Chris, hey, because she planned on pulling the camera. I said, hey, I would love to put up a camera on that private lands to see if we get another spotted skunk. And that did not come to fruition because the private landowner was like, nope, didn't, basically didn't provide permission for continued having a camera continued on their property. So that is a challenge. And no, I think that's a great idea. In terms of WCLP enrolled properties that have listed rock outcrops as one of the reasons they're enrolled, to kind of pursue that, not only for spotted skunks, but again, as Caitlin mentioned, there's a suite of species that rock outcrops benefit, wood rats, weasels, others. So, we could do more than just a specific species approach. We could get information on all species. Yeah. Caitlin, I know we just have a minute left, but we got to ask, is there any hybridization? And I think the question is hybridization between striped skunks and spotted skunks.
No.
Yeah.
That was an
Thankfully, no. Yeah.
No, yeah, they're far enough apart. They're completely different genera. So yeah, no hybridization between those two.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And Andrea, yeah, we can email you the specific species that was documented from David. We can get that information to you. Andrea asked about specific species, so certainly, yeah, we'll make sure we do that. And again, yeah, Caitlin just showed the skunk smell removal card. If you take a Trap Red class, you actually get a little card that has this formula on it. Because yeah, trappers certainly like to trap skunks. If, believe it or not, for at least striped skunks, there is a very robust market for them for their pelts. We're seeing anywhere from $20 to $50 per pelt most recently for a striped skunk pelt. So of course, since they're trapping the striped skunks, they're getting sprayed. So that's why we pass it out to Trap Red class. But Of course, I know a lot of you like to spend time outside, and it's not uncommon for you or your dog to get sprayed. So, um, you know, definitely, this is a very effective formula. I can vouch for it. All right. Yeah, Sarah asked, "Does the tomato juice remedy a farce?" I I've never tried it. It just seems really messy and yucky, and
Kind of just covers it all up with tomato
yeah,
smell.
yeah. So I'd rather save tomato juice for like a Bloody Mary and use this formula that Caitlin's showing.
Well, yeah, thank you all for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Caitlin, Colleen, thank you guys very much. And everybody's got their contact information. If they have any more questions, feel free to reach out to them. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And that's going to do it for today.
Thanks, y'all.